Hey everyone, welcome to BM Sculptures. I'm Blake, and this week we are making a Japanese style bar stool. Let's get right into it. Alright, so this build is part of the 11th season of the Builders Challenge on Instagram, and the criteria is to just build something that you sit on. Now, this is the very first piece of furniture I'm actually making where I'm not using screws or anything like that. I'm going to be doing a couple of different joinery methods, and let's be honest here, I just hope I can sit on this thing and it doesn't fall apart. But for this being my very first piece of furniture, I'm really excited to get started. And I start out by taking this 6/4 walnut and just using the hand plane to get a perfectly flat side. So this piece right here already has a bow to it, and what I'm doing is a Japanese style bar stool seat, and it has that bowed top. So for that piece, I'm actually not going to plane. Here, I'm planing both the legs. So I want perfectly flat legs to start, but I'm going to keep the bow in that top seat, so I'm not going to plane that. So here I'm ripping down the legs, and coming up right now, here you see the seat top where it is bowed, and I'm going to run that through the table saw. Now, if you've seen any of my other videos, you know that I love inlays and contrasting wood. So here, like everything else, I'm going to be using white oak to contrast the walnut, and I'm going to do two kind of inlays on this piece. So these are the legs here. I'm doing two at a time, and I'm just putting little accent pieces of white oak down both sides. And once those are dry, I get out my Harvey compass miter gauge, and I make another cross cut to put another inlay of white oak in between. And here you can see what I'm going for. I'm going to put another inlay of white oak in both legs and the seat, and actually the stretcher as well. And I'm going to have all of them matching, and I just think it's going to look cool. Before I get it into anything else, I'm actually going to fill up this knot with some epoxy with some black pigment. The knot had some loose pieces in there, so I just wanted to do it since I was done for the night, let this cure, and then I'm ready to go the next morning. And here's the next day. I'm putting both legs in the tapering jig because I want a slight taper on both of these legs. Now, this is the very first time I've ever tapered anything, so I was hoping it worked, and luckily it worked exactly as planned. Now, if you're interested in this tapering jig, let me know in the comments. Maybe I'll make a dedicated video for this if there's enough people that want to see how it's done so they can do it themselves. So let me know in the comments. Now that both legs have that slight tapered look, it's time to start working on the seat. The next challenge is to find a perfectly curved object somewhere around the shop so that I could use it as a template for my curved seat.
No. Mm-hmm. No.
Ah, perfect! I don't know how I forgot about the bandsaw brake. This thing is perfect to use as a template. So I start out by tracing this bandsaw brake on paper. Then I cut that out and use it as a template to put onto my seat top. Once everything's all traced out onto the seat, it's time to head back to the bandsaw. Make sure to put that brake back in place and then start bandsawing out those curves. And while I was at it doing the seat, I also knew I wanted to bow both legs. So I also did both legs, and here are all the cutoffs from those three pieces. Next up, I'm going to do a really rough sanding job with 60 grit sandpaper just to get all the bandsaw saw marks off these legs and seat. And once that's nice and smooth, I know for the seat, I actually want to bevel both ends, making kind of that sharp look like most Japanese bar stools have. And this is a little tricky. I actually had to put a shim under the other side since it is bowed to get this cut exactly how I wanted. I then took this little angle doohickey, I don't know what you call this thing, but this is a really rough measurement. Any woodworker will probably yell at me for doing it this way, but this was just kind of trial and error for me. And luckily I got them at the right angle I wanted, put them up against the seat. They fit how I wanted, they were spaced how I wanted, so now it's time to make the tenons. Now for the tenons, I actually made a huge mistake right here. I cut way too deep. What I wanted originally was a shoulder on all sides of this leg, but I cut too deep. So what I ended up doing is just cutting shoulder on one side, and then here you see me chiseling that down. But I still think this is going to work, but it's definitely not what I was envisioning happening. So just goes to show you, you know, if you make mistakes, you can always find another way to make it work and make the joint fit. And now I just have to cut off the remaining shoulders. Whoa, what are you doing? Stop! What? Not those shoulders! Ah, these shoulders, you big donkey. Whew, that was a close call. So all I need to do now is cut off these shoulders on both sides of both legs, and then I am ready to start making the mortise. Now here are the completed tenons, and all I have to do is make the mortise, and then I am done. And I don't know the proper way of doing this. I always just do this tape trick. It works the best for me. Put a piece of tape over your measurement, trace it out, and then put it on the actual piece you're cutting out, and there you go. There's your template. And this was much trickier than I originally anticipated. Because the seat is bowed and both legs are bowed, nothing was straight. So I had to put this at an angle on my drill press, and as you saw just a second ago, I do not have the sharpest bits. These things are so dull, it's just smoking and probably going to cause a fire here shortly. But regardless, I got the job done. I bored out most of the material, and now it's on to more finer work with the chisel. And as you can see, I am no wizard with the chisel. I'm a caveman over here just pounding on a rock and just making sure that this tenon will fit in here basically with a lot of glue. So here I'm just boring it all out and then checking fits constantly, and finally I got a good clean fit. I do the same for the other side, and would you look at that, they both actually fit. That is amazing. I did not think they were gonna fit. I thought I was gonna have to hide some screws in there, but nope, we are good. That is solid wood. Now it's time to work on the stretcher. So I'm gonna do the same white oak inlay right down the middle and start working on that. Now to keep up on the same pace as the seat and legs that are all bowed, I am also going to bow this stretcher. And yes, it's gonna make things much more difficult, but you know, I just gotta do it. So to relate to the seat, I actually want to bevel both sides at the same 70 degrees as the seat. And now it's up to decide which way do I want this stretcher, facing up or down. So what I did was I asked the Instagram crew, you could follow me at BM Sculptures on Instagram, which way this should go. And the majority, 61%, said it should go bow facing down. And that is exactly what I was hoping for, because I thought that looked better from the start. So thank you, Instagram followers. And next up, I need to turn both ends of the stretcher into a tenon. So I bore out material using my compass miter gauge on the table saw on both sides. And then to get the other two sides, I actually have to take that over to the bandsaw. Since it is bowed, I wouldn't be able to do this part on the table saw. Then I grab my chisel and some sandpaper, I clean up all the edges, and we are almost done with the stretcher. I then take the legs back to the drill press on an angle to get that fire starting Forstner bit another shot to see if it can make a fire. I get pretty close, but no fire. What a creep. Get out of here, bud. Then I just use my chisel and I make the mortise complete and check fits along the way. And we are almost done. Once most of the chisel work's done, I grab my handy dandy flea market file, and if you're interested in watching out this video of how I restored these files and made custom handles, check out the card above. I use these files to basically get the really fine adjustments to make sure that the stretcher fits on both sides. No, I have no idea how this happened, but the stretcher actually fits between these legs, and it fits pretty well. So I don't know how I did it, but it actually worked. Kind of exactly as planned. That's a first. Now it's on to make the wedges, aka the tusk of this build, and these will basically wedge in on either side of the legs. It's going to wedge that stretcher making everything nice and tight. And I just cut it out on the bandsaw, this little design that I made. And obviously you can see that I did the opposite effect here. I made them white oak with the walnut inlay, and I think this will just really give it a really cool contrast between the rest of the build. Oh no, it's the mortise creep, back at it again. Luckily he cleaned up these mortises for me, and the stretchers are ready for a dry fit with the wedges, and they're fitting really nice, so I'm pretty happy about that. And now it's time for some finish sanding, everyone's favorite part. And here are the final pieces, all finish sanded, ready for glue up. And you know, there's only like 4 or 5 parts of this chair, but it's a lot of work, let me tell you. It's a lot more work than I was expecting. Now, instead of wood glue, I decided to go with the epoxy route just to make everything that much stronger. And I apologize for not having different angles of this glue up. I had epoxy on my hands, so I wasn't able to touch the camera to maneuver it. Anyways, it is time for the finish, and here I have, I think I'm using Festool's heavy duty finish here, which is an oil-based finish, and check out that grain. Once I have 2 layers of finish, it's time to put the wedges in, and here it's crucial to not give it really hard hammers in, because you could end up splitting that walnut, which is much softer than the white oak. So little taps, little taparoos, and this thing is nice and snug and ready for its final shots. If you like this video, hit that thumbs up button and please consider subscribing. Until next time, I'm Blake from BM Sculptures.